when my students come to San Antonio, they feel that. They feel like they belong. They feel really connected.
Well, first, let's introduce you, Dr. Amanda Ramirez.
Yes.
And you are the Director of Student Success at UT San Antonio in the
Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences on the Health Science campus. Still trying to get it right. So been in this position for about 4 years. And then previously I was a psychologist providing therapy and therapeutic interventions.
Okay. So tell student success, what does that mean?
Student success is trying to support the whole student in their professional journey. So oftentimes we think about students only succeeding in the classroom or getting straight A's, and part of student success is trying to figure out what that life looks like outside once they graduate, whether that's building a family, whether that's building their careers, and what does that look like for them, and what ways can I support that journey?
Yeah. Well, okay, this is a great transition to the actual first question I had for you. So student success, given that academic jobs, it's kind of saturated, and so most of these folks graduating with a master's, PhD, academia is not where they're going to go. What sorts of activities do you bring, how do you help them be successful given that that's maybe not their future, the traditional approach?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with exploring careers, of course, but trying to figure out who they are outside of the lab. So a lot of times our students are stuck in the lab, they're doing all the bench work that's required to get to these really important scientific discoveries, but they're not interacting with people, right? What's beautiful about our scientists is that a lot of them are introverts, and then we have some extroverts, but still their life is in the lab. And so my job is to help get them outside of the lab, get them networking, meeting with people like yourself and subject matter experts in the community to see how their science applies to the real world, to see how it can apply or how they can envision themselves outside of that lab. And so part of this is trying to, use my psychologist skills to encourage networking, to encourage conversation, to get outside of our comfort zone, just to explore things that are not academia, because academia is it's a safe place. And it was for a long time. It's no longer that safe place because funding cuts. The federal government was a safe place for a lot of folks going on to the CDC or going on to the NIH, and right now, because of funding cuts, that's just limited, where we do have to really encourage students to get outside and be flexible with what their careers can look like. And so part of this is encouraging that psychological flexibility of, I can still be a scientist and it can look differently. For example, I'm a psychologist, so I'm a scientist practitioner. What I look like as a scientist is not what I was doing before, and it's not what I was doing as a researcher. That looks different, but I still apply the scientific method to the way I approach problems in my everyday life.
Yeah. So, awesome transition into the next question. Okay, so given you spend so much time in the lab, you're learning how to pipette extremely well, all of those things, but a non-academic career, it's how do you do federal contracting? How do you navigate these pathways that I don't know, what sort of training are you giving or offering or exposure? Because I think that there's so much knowledge, like what is EBITDA, just all of this sort of stuff that if you're doing a startup especially, you got to at some point know these things. And then the other part of this question is, I don't know if schools train you to fail. Part of being, and I'm really making this startup focus, but failing is part of it, right? And so failing in grad school, not a good thing. So we don't build that kind of resilience and that mentality. So 2 parts, a lot there.
Well, and I think that's what I love about, so my assistant dean, the assistant dean of student affairs, Jessica Nude, and myself, we have, when our students come in first day of orientation, we actually talk about failure and how failure is really important to being a scientist, right? Because it rules out all the other possible explanations for why something is happening, right? We have to rule that out so that we can know what doesn't work, so we can figure out what works. And so we try to instill that from the very first day and try to really encourage this growth mindset of, we don't know the answers yet, right? And so that's part of being a scientist, is doing, and continuing to explore. So I don't know what science is like outside of the lab yet, but it doesn't mean there's not opportunities. So it doesn't mean that there's not a workshop that's being put together, or that my mentor and I can't reach out to the Office of Student Success to figure out, are there industry mentors that can talk to me about this? A lot of the times it's me bringing in someone like yourself to come talk to my students about what that looks like in the startup world, bringing in Nucleus, San Antonio, our nonprofits, and leaning on them, and bringing in industry experts. So a lot of this is relationship building and making sure that I know the people that are going to be experts and going to be helpful mentors in guiding my students. I see myself as the connector of people. I just really like to put cool people in the room together so they can learn from each other, because oftentimes the mentors end up learning something new from my students in some ways. I am curious though, because you've mentored a number of my students, what have you learned from that?
I think, especially when you're pursuing a PhD, you spend so many years to learn so much about such a small thing, right? And you become the expert in that little thing. And what I often find is it's hard for folks to extrapolate the skills of problem solving and taking a large problem, breaking down into solvable chunks, right? Eating an elephant one bite at a time sort of approach. And so people will initially, when they graduate, they say, okay, I know how to do this thing, this procedure, whatever it is, right? And you're like, yeah, but step back and especially when you're doing non-academic job, you have to say, no, I'm good at this complex thing and digging in, and I can spin up on stuff very fast, know how to find primary source literature, that mindset. So when I was in grad school, I immediately thought, I'm going to do consulting, right? So I was like, I'm going to go to McKinsey and I'm going to do this. And so, what they want from you there is how many golf balls can fit in a 747 is one of the classic interview questions, right? And it's not if you have the right answer, but can you come up with an approach that is reasonable and okay, you're a problem solver, right? So I think grad schools teach you how to solve a problem, and so you get fixated on the problem you solved instead of problem solving.
Yes. It's interesting because, I'm a psychologist, and when I was applying for jobs, I remember I was applying to some testing positions, and it was kind of the same questions that McKinsey would ask a consultant of, you have this person coming in with this diagnosis, but we need to test them to see if they qualify for services. What's the battery of tests you're going to do, and how will you approach the clinical interview? And so it's very similar of okay, they really want to assess what exactly your mindset is and how you approach a situation. And so a lot of what I try to do with students is is encouraging them to collect all the data, as much data as possible, and use that as information. So to inform their future conversations. So I encourage them to go to information sessions I might have with the company, or go to a health cell event to hear from scientists, because that's all data that you're getting about people's lives, about their careers, and about potential companies you might want to work with. Two of the students I've had on here, Palomi and Vincent, them in particular, they're really great data gatherers. They go out there, they do the work to make sure that they understand the nuances to everything. And so I think when I was having my initial conversations with them, it was that exactly of, okay, we need to get outside the lab. First, we need to make sure your mentor's okay with you getting outside the lab, because you have to balance it, and I need them to graduate. They need to graduate. Their life can't be like this all the time. They need to get paid well. I want success for their families. But also, we need to get you out of the lab so that you can build that network for that next career.
Yeah, man, this is another great transition. Yeah. So you mentioned two folks that we've had on the podcast. I would say they seem to be pretty exceptional in their trajectories. They have been very productive, and both of them considering leaving San Antonio. Well, one definitely leaving for
she's gone.
Family.
She's
gone.
She's
we got her on
gone.
her last day for family reasons. The other one, also potentially, so this speaks to this brain drain that we have. And so I know you have passions and thoughts around this in many ways. So I just wanted to, put a quarter in the machine and let you go with what can we do in San Antonio? What are we doing well? What do we need to do better?
I think we have a really great community in San Antonio. I love it. I'm born and raised here, left, came back, really active. We're really great at building community and culture, and building a community that genuinely cares about each other, and genuinely wants to help each other do well and help each other thrive. So I've lived in a lot of cities. I've lived in 7 different states, I think I counted, but unofficially I probably can also say 10, because New England is a whole different thing, and I kind of lived in between all of the states. And I will say that a lot of the states across the United States are very independent mindset, very like, I'm all about myself and my career trajectory, which I loved because that's where I was at. I needed to get to grad school. What San Antonio is about, it's not only about your career trajectory, but how do we help each other and build each other up? And I think that's what makes our life sciences community a lot different, is that we help to build this belonging of how can we throw ourselves in? Like, how can Velocity also be a force for good for the east side of San Antonio, right? Like, how can we bring people together and make this a hub for the entire community, right? And Velocity has helped to do that. And so I think part of this is when my students come to San Antonio, they feel that. They feel like they belong. They feel really connected. The problem is we don't have the jobs here. We don't have the jobs, nor do we have the money if they wanted to create a startup for it to make sense. So they end up having to leave to Boston, to San Francisco, to St. Louis, to Indianapolis, to all of the bigger hubs. And right now, a lot of those jobs are also moving to the smaller hubs that have just built stronger infrastructure from the very beginning. And so I think a lot of this is how do we build like a really solid foundation for San Antonio? And unfortunately, I think we're behind on that. I think like we're 10 to 15 years too late, but that doesn't mean that we can't catch up. That doesn't mean like if we can't pull our resources together, because we have really strong, committed individuals in San Antonio, that we can't catch up. And so I think part of this is figuring out where the jobs are, but it's also working with, the city of San Antonio and the airport terminal to figure out how do we get more direct flights to those places, to Boston, to San Francisco. Because my students, if they have a startup, they still need to get to Capital. They still need to get to Dallas. They need to have as many flights as possible so that they can get to their investors, right? And those flights need to be cheap. And so I've noticed that a lot in our startup community, even for the mentors that I have for my students. They're often not in San Antonio, even though their company is here, because the money is not here. So they're here maybe once a month in San Antonio, but really they're flying all over the world in the US to get money to fund their company that's based here. And so part of this is looking at flights. Part of this is looking at, okay, what's going to make San Antonio desirable to companies so that they can start investing. Part of it's UT San Antonio merging and building this R01 infrastructure to say we are a powerhouse. The thing that North Carolina and the thing that Boston and most of those big cities have on us is that they have a giant university infrastructure that goes much deeper and longer than UT San Antonio's been around, right? And so we're still playing catch up as a university. I think we're doing a remarkable job, and President Amy's helping with that. But I think the more UT San Antonio can really strengthen our city and really work with stakeholders like Velocity, like Texas BioBridge Global, the more we can really build up that infrastructure and build it quickly. Because all of those other cities have had decades to build what they have. UNC, Duke, Harvard, MIT. I mean, we're not going to catch up to that, at least not right away. But we're doing a pretty good job. I mean, considering that, like UT Austin's scale and how big UT Austin has been throughout the past 50 years compared to UT San Antonio, I think we're doing a great job. So I think, we're getting there. It's just about pulling our resources together and the enthusiasm.
Well, so you touched on, I was going to ask a question about the merger. You kind of already hit that. I love that you brought in flights because it's like a thing that I don't think would necessarily come up in this, but you're totally right. I mean, I know when the Nucleate folks were trying to do Nucleate Texas, bring this here, there was a big thing about all the big cities couldn't fly directly into San Antonio. So it matters. It definitely matters. So one of the things that we've talked about just on other podcasts are like leaning into things at San Antonio that we have some inherent advantage in that would allow us to not replicate what Dallas is doing at Pegasus Park or on the coast, right? Like what can we do that just sets us apart but also allows us to grow? And so I have thoughts on that. But what I was going to ask you is more about like what would be, as we do these steps, what are metrics of success that we can start? Like, so in your head, what are things like near term, midterm, long term that would be, we're going in the right direction. And so I don't know if you want to get into biomanufacturing or, but I'm just saying, like what are steps that we can start taking, and then how do we say that's in the right direction, we're making progress?
Yeah, I think right now we before we can say we're making progress, we need to understand where we are currently. I don't think there's anyone doing a full assessment of San Antonio's life sciences. So right now, the current assessments that exist of how we're doing is measured with healthcare and life sciences combined. Those are two separate things. Healthcare is wonderful. I worked in healthcare.
Healthcare delivery.
Healthcare delivery.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the provision of services, right, is necessary to any big city, the provision of services. San Antonio is actually doing really well nationally in terms of healthcare delivery. Austin's the one struggling, which Austin, by the way, is giving really great bonuses for my students to move up to Austin. So we have some competition because they're trying to play catch up in their healthcare delivery. And I do have people that commute from San Antonio, school at UT San Antonio, to go all the way up to Austin because Austin pays better for them to drive back and forth every week. So that's just a side note of healthcare delivery. Hey, they're trying to catch up and also steal our resources.
Yeah.
But that is separate from life sciences. Life sciences, everything that goes behind the healthcare, the research, the science behind what comes out of the clinics that you see. And so I think first is trying to separate those two as a city and do a real honest assessment of where are we? What companies do we have? Like we know Texas BioBridge Global, we know Sweary, but we also know that, like life sciences is only a small segment, research and development is only a small segment of what they do. BioBridge Global is huge. So is Sweary, right? Sweary also does research on military capabilities, right?
And JPL, they do the moon. Every time you see a picture from the rover, it's
Yes.
like, it was Sweary that helped crunch that. Yeah, it's
Yes,
amazing.
so they're doing so many other things, and life sciences is just a very small portion, right? And so when people think Sweary, they're like, oh, but they have us covered life sciences-wise. It's like, no, we are only a very small fraction of what this wonderful company provides to San Antonio. And when we're looking at companies in San Antonio, we do have to do an honest assessment of what exactly they're contributing life sciences wise and where can we grow? What are their strengths, which a lot of it's drug production, drug development. That's one of our strengths here in San Antonio. And also, how do we grow that strategically? Because we're not going to bring a company here to San Antonio or even have a new company come in and want to build here unless they know what we have already and what our assets are, and really accurately what our assets are, not what we're telling the newspapers or not what we want to be, but who we really are. And I think there's this certain level of trust that's built with authenticity and with data, especially in a time of misinformation, that's really important. And I think companies, reputable companies that are willing to move their sites to San Antonio or to Texas really want to see that data and that honest assessment. So I have really enjoyed working with like Greater SATX to try to figure out, okay, how do we portray ourselves? Like, how do we tell people that we have really great labor shed from the military workforce? That we have these really great people that we can train to work in the lab. And we have those training capabilities at Alamo colleges, right? But how do we advertise that? Or the fact that Alamo Biosciences is now training middle schoolers and high schoolers in how to work in industry, in life sciences. Like, people don't know that. Like, there's no website that says that. And so how do we be honest about those things? And then also be honest of, like, we have room for improvement. So there's a lot of nuances that go into this and gathering all of this data. I will say one of the things I did learn about this whole thing as I'm trying to, again, work with employers to fund my students is that utilities are also really important. So if a company wants to move to San Antonio, in addition to flights, right, direct flights, utilities, how much water like what are the incentives for moving here? Is this site that I want to build on shovel ready? Does it have the capabilities to put water, we have to use this much energy in order to meet our FDA compliance standards? CPS, is SAWS ready to do that? And so there's a lot of different stakeholders that you wouldn't think have to come to the table to make that happen. And part of this is not only collecting that data of what sites work and what don't, but also bringing together what I would say unconventional, because you don't think about it, unconventional people to the table to have this conversation, to be like, well, how much water do we need to build a new manufacturing site? How much electricity do we need to build this? And also, who has the funds to start building something shovel ready to prepare for that? There's wonderful people in development that know all of this stuff, but they don't know the nuances of the science, right? So it takes someone who understands development and also someone who understands science to come together to say, okay, now let's talk. And it does require people in between to help make sure that relationship is sustained.
Yeah. Well, so things that we can promote that we have talked about on here, and this is a question we ask everybody, and this is a hot one, so you got to get ready.
I'm for hot takes today.
Yeah, this is a hot take. Where is the best margarita in the city? And this is important because obviously we should promote our margarita scene, but one of the things that we love to talk about, where is the best one? We've had some weird answers on here.
Really?
Well, yeah.
What are the weird ones? Like, did someone say a gas station?
Well,
or the drive-thru?
Vincent was just like, my house. And then they're like, what's your recipe? And he's like, I don't know. And he's talked about his magic hands. So, you know, we've had that. We've had, I don't drink margaritas. So that went over poorly. So, yeah, you have to.
Okay. I had a favorite place. It's no longer open, and I'm really sad about it. But the owners...
How convenient to pick a closed location.
Well, so a closed location in hopes that someone will make it reemerge, because the bartenders that were all convened at this location just did a fantastic job. They were previously at the Modernist. Now they're scattered throughout San Antonio, and it's very hard for me to locate each of them individually. Okay. But La Ruina, it was here on the east side. Okay. It was wonderful. They had the best drinks, the best margaritas. It had the best atmosphere, very low-key and quiet, and great for adult conversation. Music wasn't too loud, and the best cocktails. And so David, who was the head bartender manager there, he now works at a tiki bar downtown, but I don't go to the downtown Riverwalk area.
Paradise Lost one?
I don't know. It's underneath La Honky Tonk, I think.
Yeah, I think it might be.
So David is a great mixologist, and
he must be at Tugman's Oasis.
Oh yes, he's at Tugman's Oasis.
No, that's a good one.
Tugman's Oasis. Yeah. So David is, I will say, like the best bartender in town. He makes the best concoctions, and whatever team he has is wonderful. But Tugman's Oasis is also the downtown of the downtown, which. I don't know if you read a recent article on The Voice San Antonio, but there was talking about 3 parts of downtown, that there's like the tourist downtown, there's a Pearl downtown, there's Southside downtown, like how people experience downtown.
I love that.
I don't really go downtown, okay. And partially because I don't feel young enough. Yeah. I think I'm too old. I've aged out of being that cool.
That's fair. But have you been to the Monarch? Have you seen the new Monarch?
Oh my goodness. So I'm part of Leadership San Antonio 50. And one of the architects, like one of the primary architects of the Monarch, Barbara, she's from UT San Antonio, and Barbara Warren, UT San Antonio, and she was one of the architects of the Monarch. So we got to see it the day after it opened. She invited us into the space. We were allowed to see it and see what beautiful structure she built, and the interiors, and just the nuances of the art and the structure, and even the staircases. It's a work of art. Yeah, it really is.
Gorgeous. We're lucky. It's one of those spots where you're like, really, San Antonio? Look at us.
I know.
Yeah, I love that.
I mean, we can be fancy.
We can be fancy.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got the margarita. That was another. Okay,
I would say backup is La Fogata.
We cannot. This
La Fogata is the number 2.
Okay, we've had La Fogata.
La Fogata is number 2.
We got, but
it's got to be Vance Jackson.
It's got to be Vance Jackson. I mean, I grew up in that neighborhood. That's my neighborhood.
Okay, so execs are coming from mid-level biomanufacturing, and they're like, we're going to set up in San Antonio, but you want to wine and dine them, right?
Meet Yetta. You know, you only take people to meet Yetta for that. If they want to experience San Antonio culture and what family and culture is all about.
Oh, margarita. Wait, we just jumped.
No. Meet Yetta has margaritas. And
Good
they have
margaritas?
Yes. And they have great culture. And the Cortez family has done so much for the city of San Antonio and so much for the Market Square in downtown that they are a model of what small to mid-sized companies can be and can continue to be, and how San Antonio has continued to lift them up. Their story is beautiful.
Okay. That's where you're taking them.
You take them to a story.
Okay.
Right? Like you're trying to sell San Antonio's story, not a margarita. Right?